with not just partners, as you said, but trusted friends. And this has been the case for 60 years. And indeed, this trust dates back to the birth of an independent Singapore and to the exceptional relationship that Singapore's founding father, Lee Kuan Yew, was able to forge with France. And as we commemorate the 10th anniversary of his passing, I wanted to take a moment to remember this extraordinary man. His vision continues to inspire us. It is marked by modernity, tolerance, and political determination. This shows that these values are indeed compatible, which should serve as a broad source of inspiration for our current times. In any case, in the face of the temptation to turn inward, to embrace protectionism, or to resort to violence, this way of thinking holds an inspirational power that should not be overlooked. I am very pleased, and I thank you, Prime Minister, for your welcome last night, for the journey we have shared, our discussions, and the very good, very fruitful exchange we had this morning. I would like to return to a few points that you have just mentioned. First of all, let me say that we both believe in effective multilateralism. I will have the opportunity to come back to this in a moment, since you have given me, and I thank you for it, the chance to speak at the Shangri-La Dialogue. But I want to emphasize here just how much there is a shared perspective on this matter between Singapore and France. First of all, we are very grateful to you for the stance you have taken since the beginning of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine by taking measures against Russia and supporting Ukraine. And this is the demonstration made by your predecessor and yourself that fundamentally this war is obviously existential for Europeans and their security, but that it concerns the entire planet and that we cannot allow the law of the strongest to prevail. Our two countries want a robust and lasting peace that begins with an immediate ceasefire, and we are precisely supporting the international order. We also discussed the situation in the Middle East. In the immediate term, it is imperative that the Palestinian population be able to receive humanitarian aid. But we are also convinced that there is a path to lasting peace that guarantees peace for everyone, both Israelis and Palestinians. And that is precisely the goal of the political process we wish to initiate regarding mutual recognition and the possibility of a Palestinian state, with the prerequisites that I have mentioned in recent days and to which I can return if any questions are raised. As an Indo-Pacific country, France also stands alongside Singapore to emphasize the importance of respecting international law in the region, particularly regarding freedom of navigation, without which there can be no trade and consequently no prosperity. And as Singapore participates in the G20 as an observer, and France will chair the G7 next year, we share the desire to strengthen international partnerships, to advance the reform of international financial institutions and the Pact for the Prosperity of People and the Planet, which we launched in 2023 and which Singapore has joined, fully embodies this ambition, namely that no country should have to choose between fighting poverty and combating climate change. This multilateral action is rooted in a now strengthened bilateral partnership, as you mentioned, with this comprehensive strategic partnership signed on the occasion of this visit, which extends across a wide range of areas. We are going to establish cooperation in civil nuclear energy to support Singapore in building its expertise. We will share our expertise and know-how in decarbonized energy and electrical connectivity. This is the aim of the ASEAN Power Grid and major projects like those we have just signed in Indonesia, which will also make it possible to supply decarbonized energy to Singapore. This is at the heart of what we are signing in the fields of artificial intelligence, quantum technology, and cybersecurity, as well as the partnerships we wish to establish in the area of space. We are going to strengthen our long-standing cooperation in the aviation sector with the prospect of new projects involving Singapore's airport, which is one of the most important in the world. And in the defense sector, as you mentioned, Prime Minister, we are proud to have Singapore's trust, to have been training your pilots at CASO since 1998, and to have a unique partnership across all areas of the field. And here I was referring to the training partnership in aviation, but we are also providers of maritime capabilities. We have extremely intensive exchanges in terms of artificial intelligence and a close relationship in the field of intelligence. I will not be exhaustive regarding all the agreements we signed this morning. I could also recall, as you did, the importance of cultural, human, and educational exchanges that we will continue to strengthen between our countries. This afternoon, other agreements will be signed by operators and companies from both our countries. An economic forum will also be held, and this enhanced strategic partnership truly reflects our commitment indeed to sovereignty and strategic autonomy. It also aims to develop Singaporean investment projects in France. Temasek paved the way by establishing itself in France last year. This was a commitment made during a previous edition of Choose France. This afternoon, we will have the opportunity to meet several investors and entrepreneurs, and I hope that our relationship and mutual investments can also intensify. Allow me to conclude with a European message. By visiting Southeast Asia throughout this week, we have begun to realize the immense potential for cooperation between your region, with nearly 700 million inhabitants, and a Europe of 450 million inhabitants. And France will always support the European Union's efforts to strengthen ties with ASEAN countries, particularly in the economic sector, through new trade agreements, just as we are eager, together with you, to also strengthen ties with the Trans-Pacific Partnership and to reopen a dialogue specifically for a comprehensive agreement with the partners of this Trans-Pacific format in terms of trade, exchanges, and innovation. Europe can contribute its expertise, its know-how, and its internal market. And as you mentioned, the CPTPP and the European Union together represent about a third of the world's wealth. This represents an even greater trading capacity. And the connection between Europe and ASEAN, between Europe and the CPTPP, is clearly a way to implement effective multilateralism, but also the strategic autonomy in which both Singapore and France firmly believe. Prime Minister, thank you for your hospitality, the quality of our discussions, and the trust that drives the agenda between Singapore and France. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Now we will begin the questions. We have limited time for the press. Let us begin with the French media first. AFP, please.
Good evening. Hello, Mr. Francesco Fontemaggi from Agence France Presse. Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. President, as you said, tonight you will open the Shangri-La dialogue and present your geopolitical vision. Can you tell us a bit more in detail what the key message is that you intend to convey? And since the beginning of this tour, you have advocated for a posture of balanced and credible power on the world stage. But isn't this credibility itself undermined when, from Kyiv, together with other Europeans, you issue ultimatums accompanied by threats of massive sanctions against Russia? You claim to be doing this in concert with Donald Trump, but so far, these ultimatums have not been followed by any concrete action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Listen, I am here first of all to say that France is a player in the Indo-Pacific. Through our overseas territories, more than 1 million of our fellow citizens live in the region. Through our military and strategic presence, more than 8,000 soldiers are deployed in the region, as well as through the joint exercises we conduct, which we have significantly increased in recent years. Since 2018, France has established an Indo-Pacific strategy. We then Europeanized it 3 years later, and this strategy is about asserting that there is a third possible path, which is neither submission to China nor conflict with China, but rather the desire to preserve freedoms and sovereignty, and therefore a world based on respect for international rules and mutual respect among all the powers in the region. This is, I believe, a very strong lever for strategic alignment and convergence of interests with many ASEAN countries, whose central role we fully recognize, as well as with the entire region. This is also why France has multiplied its capacity building and strategic partnerships with all the countries of the Indo-Pacific in recent years. And from Indonesia to India, all the way to the United Arab Emirates, we have deployed the Rafale offer as well as our submarine offer. We have the close relationship, as we described with the Prime Minister, that has existed for 60 years with Singapore, and for the past 25 years we have been training aviators together. But we have also implemented a diplomatic, economic and innovation agenda, from artificial intelligence to many other fields, and sustainable growth with many countries in the region. And so, in an increasingly uncertain world where ultimately the rules of the game are sometimes challenged by the strongest, we believe that reaffirming our shared credibility, a common understanding of the world, and also our ability to act together is a structuring element. I do not believe that what happens after Kyiv is a credibility problem for Europeans. I think it is a test of credibility for the Americans. We Europeans have been consistent for the past 3 years. We sanction Russia, we support Ukraine, and we do not want an escalation that would lead to a new world war. We were right since February to form this coalition of volunteers that in a moment of uncertainty, and this is very consistent with what I just told you about the region and the Indo-Pacific, said we want to go further, and ultimately we want to tell the Ukrainians, we support you and we are here to build a lasting peace with you. In Kyiv, a few weeks ago, together with Prime Minister Starmer, Chancellor Merz, and Prime Minister Tusk, and then by bringing together all our colleagues from the coalition of volunteers via video conference, we said, we support the American proposal for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire at sea, in the air, and on land, which was agreed to as early as March by President Zelensky. And together, we are ready to build the foundations of a strong and lasting peace by providing Ukraine with security guarantees. We then coordinated with the American president, who gave his support to this approach. Finally, we Europeans are ready to take part in deterrent sanctions if the Russians do not come to the negotiating table and do not, in some way, present a credible ceasefire proposal. The weeks that followed showed that Russia was not ready. I note that President Trump, in recent days, has strongly condemned the Russian strikes in Ukraine. I spoke with President Trump 48 hours ago, and he expressed his impatience. The question now is, what do we do with this? We are ready. And so we are waiting for two responses. Either confirmation from Russia that it is not ready to make peace, or a clear answer and a path in that direction. And depending on the Russian response, the American commitment that was confirmed to us in Kyiv. The Europeans are credible, they are consistent, and they are reliable. I do not believe that this is a sign of weakness in any way. On the contrary. And I think it is the same credibility, the same reliability that is being offered here to our partners in the Indo-Pacific. We have not changed. We still believe in the international order, in cooperation, in open trade, and in respect for these rules. And we are partners who are ready to engage with Singapore and all the countries in the region to improve collective security, to establish a framework for innovation that respects our shared rules, and to ensure that the international order is restored. I see a great deal of coherence and consistency in this position, from the far reaches of Europe to the Indo-Pacific and today in Singapore.
Thank you. Next question, Channel News Asia, please.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, President Macron. My name is Geraldine. I'm from CNA. My question is for Prime Minister Wong. At the cabinet swearing-in ceremony last week, you said that Singapore would be a steady and constructive partner in a world of shifting alliances. So, in the context of this bilateral relationship between Singapore and France, what can Singapore offer, and what is Singapore expecting from France in return?
All countries will engage one another on the basis of wanting to advance their national interests. This is to be expected. But between countries, we often can find common ground and shared interests, and that's Singapore's approach. That instead of focusing on differences, we focus on our areas of common interest and advance them together. And certainly between France and Singapore, we have many common areas of interest, from security to the economy to energy, and many of the areas which we talked about earlier. So, what Singapore will bring to the table as a constructive partner is that we will always be a steadfast supporter to advance these areas of shared interest together in order to achieve win-win outcomes for both sides. And agreements we signed just now attest to that. The deep and significant levels of trust that has been established between both countries at the leadership level, across the officials, and even at the people-to-people level attest to that we will always be reliable, credible, and a steadfast partner to France and to other partners as well in thinking of ways in which we can achieve win-win outcomes. Between France and Singapore, I think there is another important area where there is shared interest, which is that we both believe deeply in multilateralism and a rules-based global order. We know that this global order is shifting. What we have seen before in the decades past is starting to change. No one knows what the new order will be in the coming years' time, so we are in a period of transition. And in this period of transition, it's important that like-minded countries work together to put in place the outlines and the pillars of a new order that will ensure stability and continued shared prosperity for countries around the world. That's what France and Singapore are doing, and we are doing it not just bilaterally, but we are also working through some of the initiatives we discussed just now. For example, enhancing EU-ASEAN partnership, strengthening the links or potentially forging a new partnership between the EU and the CPTPP. These are significant moves which I believe will help to further emphasize the principles of free trade, of the rules-based trading system, and will ensure that we are able to put in place the new pillars of multilateralism that will eventually emerge in the years to come.
Thank you. Next question, TF Ang, LCE.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, Mr. President. This is Labu Griou for TF1 LCI. My question is about Gaza. Throughout this visit, you have repeatedly emphasized your opposition to double standards. While you are advocating for massive sanctions against Russia, the European Union is now considering reviewing the association agreement with Israel. Should we go further? Should Israel be sanctioned? And finally, can you confirm your attendance at the international conference in New York? And do you plan to recognize the state of Palestine on that occasion? Some people now say that it is a moral necessity. How do you respond to them? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think it all depends on the choices that will be made by the Israeli government in the coming days. And it is very clear today that we cannot allow the situation to continue. The humanitarian blockade that currently prevails is creating a situation on the ground that is unsustainable. A few weeks ago, I was able to go to the border with President Sisi in El Arish, and I saw both the distress of the wounded who were being cared for in Egyptian hospitals and who had been able to leave during the ceasefire period that had been granted for a few weeks, but which, I remind you, has ended since the beginning of March. And I was also able to see, and several of you were by my side, all the humanitarian aid that was stored there, coming from all over the world and blocked by the Israeli army. This situation is unacceptable, and today, providing water, food and medicine and allowing the wounded to leave is a priority. And so if there is not a response that matches the scale of the humanitarian situation provided in the coming hours and days, then obviously we will have to toughen our collective stance and in any case enforce the rules we have set for ourselves. That is, to put an end to processes that require respect for human rights, which is not the case today, and to apply sanctions, just as we have already done individually, I remind you, against Israeli settlers who indiscriminately fired on civilian populations in the West Bank. And so, yes, we must toughen our position because it is now a necessity, but I still hope that the Israeli government will change its stance and that we will finally have a humanitarian response. France, together with Saudi Arabia, will co-host this conference in June, on the 18th of June. We are currently working on it. For me, what has happened in recent days is very important. I had a very important discussion here with the Prime Minister, particularly about our cooperation in the context of this conference. I also had a very good discussion with President Prabowo, who made his position public the day before yesterday. And for me, this is a very important point, since he expressed his willingness on the day when the State of Israel is ready to recognize Palestine, to in turn recognize Israel himself, which is not currently the case, and of course, to also recognize its right to live in peace and security in the region. And so, what we are working to build in the coming weeks is, of course, a political response to the crisis. And yes, it is a necessity, because today, beyond the ongoing humanitarian tragedy, the very possibility of having a Palestinian state is being called into question. And it is clear that some people are intent on making a Palestinian state impossible. However, what we are advocating for is a political resolution to the situation. There was the terrorist attack by Hamas on October 7th, which France firmly condemned, the legitimate response from Israel, which we supported in its right to defend itself and the fight against the terrorist group Hamas. We have fought and continue to fight for the release of all the hostages, but we are convinced that the response cannot be solely a security one, it must be political. And so, the creation of a Palestinian state following the release of the hostages, the demilitarization of Hamas, the non-participation of Hamas in that state, and the reform of the Palestinian Authority, but a Palestinian state that will recognize Israel's right to live in security, along with the establishment of a security framework for the entire region, is the only desirable outcome for everyone's security, and the only one that will guarantee peace in the region. And so this is not simply a moral duty, but a political necessity. And I also believe it is true realism. All those who are committed to the right of people to self-determination, to being able to decide for themselves, and all those who are committed to the freedom and security of Israel, I believe should come together around this shared vision. In any case, this is what we continue to work towards, and it is what we will try to affirm during an important moment on June 18th together, Yisrael.
If I may just say a few words to add on to what the President had said. I know the question was addressed to him, but I should also highlight Singapore's position on this matter. We've always said that Israel had a right to defend itself. But unfortunately, Israel's response has gone too far, and its actions have caused a terrible humanitarian disaster. And the restrictions imposed on the delivery of humanitarian supplies are completely unacceptable. In our opinion, it may even be a likely breach of international humanitarian law, so it cannot be justified. We join countries around the world to call for an immediate ceasefire, for the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid, for the protection of civilians, and also for the return of hostages. Of course, beyond the current crisis itself, Singapore also supports the right of the Palestinian people to their own homeland. This has to be done as part of a negotiated two-state solution because that is the only way for a comprehensive, just, and durable solution to this long-standing Israel-Palestine conflict. So there have been international efforts on both fronts on the ceasefire, the return of hostages, as well as on a roadmap towards a negotiated two-state solution, including the efforts by France and Saudi Arabia for a conference next month. We will participate in this. We will join with the international community towards such a long, durable solution.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you. We have time for a last question from Lian He Zaobao, please.
Hi, good afternoon, President Macron and Prime Minister Wong. My name is, and I'm from Lian He Zaobao. So the first part of my question is for President Macron. Given France's close ties and alignment with the US on various geopolitical issues, how is France looking to present itself as a third force and alternative in Southeast Asia amid the US-China rivalry? And what specific actions will France take to enhance its presence and influence in the region? And for PM Wong, what role do you see or hope to see France playing in the region amid this geopolitical situation? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are close allies with the United States of America, you're right. But we are not dependent on the United States of America for our defense capacities. And France is quite an exception in Europe for that because we developed our own capacities for decades for our energy and for a full range of questions. It's not totally true for all the Europeans, but we are working hard in order to strengthen our strategic autonomy and its core for the French and the European agenda. This is why, given this specificity, and given the fact that through our overseas territories, we are part of Indo-Pacific, because from New Caledonia, French Polynesia, Wallis and Futuna, Reunion Island, Mayotte and other small territories, we are part of this region. We have 1 million inhabitants living in this region. We have more than 8,000 soldiers, a lot of common exercises with a lot of countries of the region, and a specific presence and specific partnerships with a lot of countries of the region. We are clearly an Indo-Pacific player, And what we can offer is precisely the fact that being part of an alliance but having this independence, we do believe in the same values. We believe in a rule of law basis, and we believe in open trade, and we believe in this liberty of sovereignty, to quote a former Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. And in such a context, I think we have quite a unique position, and we are very lucid. We are not part of this superpower. We are neither China nor the US. We don't want to depend on none of them. We want to cooperate with both as far as we can, and we can cooperate for growth and prosperity and stability for our people and the world order. And I think this is exactly the same view as a lot of countries and a lot of people of this region. So we want to play together in order to do so. How to de-risk ourselves and how precisely to engage with ASEAN, which is clearly central, but all the Indo-Pacific members in order to have more stability, de-risk ourselves from these big players, and work very closely together to have this third way possible.
Singapore and ASEAN's view is that we want to have an open and inclusive region in Asia, a region where openness and inclusivity are valued and promoted among all its members. We want a region that is not dominated by any single power, but instead remains balanced and allows for the voices and interests of all countries to be considered. That is, does not have exclusive arrangements with any single power. We want to embrace multiple of comprehensive engagement with all parties and embrace win-win arrangements rather than zero-sum competition. That's Singapore's approach, that's also ASEAN's approach, and we believe in the collective interest of all the parties in this region. So while a lot of focus has been about US and China, in fact, there are other major powers to engage. France, as the President says, is a Pacific power. France has significant capabilities across a wide range of different areas, and we have long-standing relations with France bilaterally, but we also welcome France to do more, not just with Singapore, but also with the rest of Southeast Asia. And we are very happy that the President had a very good visit this time, not just to Singapore, but prior to this, to Vietnam, to Indonesia. And he will be the first European leader to speak at the Shangri-La Dialogue later this evening. So we welcome that enhanced engagement of Southeast Asia by France, but importantly, we also welcome enhanced engagement by Europe. And France leading the way for the rest of Europe to engage Southeast Asia and ASEAN in a more significant way, I think is an important strategic imperative for us. And we can engage across a wide range of areas on defense, on security, on the economy, on energy, on all the things that we talked about. So the bilateral initiatives that we have between Singapore and France can be a pathfinder for Europe and ASEAN to do more together as well. And by having these additional links, for all the major powers to have stakes in Southeast Asia and Asia to work together to find win-win arrangements. We believe such a configuration makes for a stabler configuration in Asia. It will reduce the chances of conflict, and it will maximize the likelihood for continued peace and shared prosperity amongst all the parties.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the joint press conference between France and Singapore.